Okay, Erev Tov. So we have been discussing, we discussed at length differences between about how the conservative movement reaches halachic decision making and where we can agree with some of the considerations, where we disagree. We discussed a lot of different details and examples. What we started doing last time was all kinds of things that people say in Orthodox circles about conservative and reform, and are they true? Last time we discussed the conservative and reform are worse than non-religious or things of that kind, or they're causing the numbers of Am Yisrael to go down and so on. I'm not going to go back to them. For today, we have two more, and then we're going to start to discuss a little halacha of Moshe Feinstein and his psak about reform and conservative in America, and let's say around the second half of from the like 50s, 60s, 70s in America in the 1900s, and our goal, I don't know if we'll get there today. Our goal is to see a different possible attitude to the halachic discussion. So here's a great sentence that says, people say, I was really open. I went to see a Reform temple and it was just like church. I felt like I was in church. Or if I put it even worse, the Reform are like Christians. They're not Jewish. They're like, I mean, they're Jewish, but they're like Christians. So a couple of points about this. First of all, saying that a Reform temple, first of all, I think there's a big difference here between conservative and Reform. Reform clearly moves farther away and is more adapted to what they've seen by other nations and other religions. Conservative is more based on the traditional Judaism with certain variations and changes that we can agree or disagree on. And so here there's a difference, but let's look at Reform, and also let's differentiate between other countries and Israel. I think, again, Reform very much adapts to where they are. So, and it started as adapting to, this is not speaking to the people in the 19th century. Let's do something that will be more appropriate for what they see around them. As we've discussed in the past, what it does is it brings certain people to be connected while watering down the Jewish aspects of it. So that's the pros and cons, the kind of two-edged sword, where you want on the one hand not to make it so different from what people are used to. On the other hand, losing just that point of losing the Judaismism of it, the Jewishness of it. So maybe there's truth to that. Maybe there's truth to saying that there's, in some ways, in some places, I wouldn't say this as a generalization, but maybe in some places it does resemble and remind us of all kinds of Christian things. But that's exactly the point, that this exists for people who this is the only thing that's going to bring them. And if they don't have this, they're not going to have anything. That's exactly the point, why this exists and why maybe it should exist. You can agree or disagree, but don't just throw it out. And that's one aspect of it. There's another aspect, and again, I don't think this is true in Israel. I have never been to a Reform tefillah or anything like that in Israel. I'm sure that I would feel uncomfortable, but and I don't know, how could I say if it's like a church? I've never been to prayer in a church. I don't know, but I could say, from what I've seen, or in all kinds of scenes or programs, or maybe something serious. But I'm sure that in Israel it's different than in other places. It's more Israeli. It's more connected to where we are. And again, I'm sure there's a difference between conservative and Reform. Reform gives itself much more freedom to choose and pick whatever they like and keep out what they don't like. Conservative has more boundaries, and yet it has its value for those people for whom this is important. And then the other question is, not in Beit Knesset, not in temple, not in prayer, what are there similarities? Are there not similarities to what's going on in other places? And then I'm not going to mention names, but I'm going to relate to a couple of rabbis who said things. I don't want to mention their names because probably it won't be the first thing that we have, some of us or all of us will feel very upset about it. But I don't want to mention their names, but the content is enough. People who say like the Reform are not Jewish, they're idol worshippers of the Avodah Zarah. A book that's headline is Christianity without a cross. That's what it's called. And it's about reform and how, we should be against reform. And it describes things that happen in reform temples without, it gives that headline, but it doesn't really show anything where it resembles Christianity. So sometimes it's just propaganda. It's propaganda without any real basis to say that it's like Christians. Then there's another rabbi who actually wrote a whole piece about it. And he asks, what is the difference between Reform and Christian? And he makes comparisons. And he says, for instance, they both claim that they are the real Jews. Christianity claims that they're the real Jews. Reform claim that they're the real Jews. And what's going to happen is just like what happened to the Christians, that they ended up totally separating and becoming non-Jewish. That's what's going to happen here. It's going to become a new religion without connection to Judaism. And when they ask what should our attitude be towards the Reform, the rabbi answers, if it's about the Reform religion, that's his term, data reform, if it's about the Reform religion, we should not let it have any presence in our society. But if it's about the people, we should have, like we love all Jews, we should love these Jews, even though they're Reform, just like we love all Jews, those who are Jewish. Because he says it's not easy to know with them who's Jewish, because they say that 80% of them are not Jewish. This is how he puts it. Yesh to'anim, there are those who claim that 80% of them are not Jewish. So it's very superficial, extremely superficial, throwing out. It's very the lowest way of like political adversary, where you make claims, you don't have to prove them, you exaggerate them, you say somebody said that 80% of them aren't Jewish, and so on, and then, but of course it carries no serious weight. It's not true. It is true, and we can discuss this, and we will, about conversion, about accepting people who are not Jews without conversion, about what is the conversion valid or not valid. But to say that 80% of Reform, let's say in the United States, are not Jewish is just nonsense, and is not realistic. So we don't have to look at that. There are some places where we should look at. One of them is a claim that the Christians believe that Torah is God-given. Torah min hashamayim. The Old Testament was given by God. And then their claim is the New Testament was also given by God, overriding the Old Testament. But the Old Testament, the Torah, was given by God, whereas the Reform don't have this in their set of beliefs. This may be true. This may be true. It might not be 100% true. I did actually discuss this, if you remember, a few months ago. Not with someone a Reform. I discussed this. I actually did discuss this once in the past with a Reform Rabbah. And I would say her point was that we believe that there's something heavenly about it, but that does not mean that we accept the Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses, as being given by God. But there's something supernatural, something higher about the Torah. So it could be 100% true. It can be 90% true. Maybe there are different Reform people and different Reform rabbis who have different opinions on this question, but it carries weight. This does carry weight as far as, yes, this is a serious claim. But does that mean, okay, so they don't believe in Torah min hashamayim, they don't believe Torah is God-given, but does that mean that for all the people who come there, this is negative, it's detrimental, it's causing more damage than good? Because what? Because without this, what would they be doing? It's I think it's very important to understand what are the options. If they would come, and I have to ask myself, where would my boundaries be? Where would I put a red line? If they would come to shul and tell people, we have a better idea, come to us, and actively pose a threat to what we're doing, not because people meet other things in the world and they make their free decisions, because they actively come to pull people away from us, and they would take people who believe in Torah min hashamayim and pull them away into something which is watered down, doesn't include Torah min hashamayim, doesn't include a lot of mitzvot and prohibitions and so on. That would be one situation. But the reality that I see here is that the rabbis, the Reform rabbis, those who I know, not very many, but those who I know, so keeping up a Jewish tradition and a Jewish culture is very important to them. They see value. They see values in it. Maybe they don't see the same godliness that I believe that is in it, but they see values in it. They don't just, it's not only a culture. It's not only, this is what my grandparents did and this is what we know, we eat such food on this date, so we have to do the same thing that our grandparents did. It's more serious than that for them. And for their communities and the people that they're trying to be relevant towards them, they want to keep up something Jewish. So I'm not saying I agree with them, but I don't think that the comparison to Christianity is correct or valid. Another thing, another claim this rabbi raised was, wow, listen to this one. This is, I won't say any more than that. I didn't say. I said that I'm not saying. I won't say any more than that. That some things that they do are damaging the state of Israel, like they have a lot of money. So they support all kinds of organizations like the New Israel Fund, or all kinds of organizations that are or are not, or some people claim are causing damage to the state of Israel, and they control things in Israeli politics and everything like that. This is why we should be opposed to them, because they're causing damage to the state of Israel. Now, what does that remind you of? It sounds like an anti-Semitic claim about the Jews. Yeah. And you know what? Where it's true, meaning if you have proof of someone, of whether they're outside of Israel or within Israel, whether they're Haredi or Reform or Kippah Sruga, but they're joining forces with people who are anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic, then present that claim with facts. And yes, I would agree. We have to oppose this. I always say, I don't know the facts, but I understand that Moshe Arens, Zichrono Livracha, who was the defense minister in the time of, I don't remember, was it Begin's government? Arens, yeah.
Yeah, he was Begin's. He was against the Egyptian peace treaty.
He was okay. Right wing. Ezel reminds us that he was right wing, and he even opposed the peace treaty with Egypt. He was the defense minister when Begin was prime minister, and he had a brother, a full 100% blood brother, who was anti-Israel. He's originally American. His brother was in America, anti-Israeli, and he disconnected. He was in opposition to his brother. I understand that we draw a red line. There's a place where you say this person is Jewish, but causing damage to the people of Israel, but not to make a generalization about a movement that does all kinds of things. And because there are certain people who do something, so you're going to say that the whole movement is that way. I don't think there's any ground or anything reasonable about that kind of claim. Tova, you wanted to say something before?
Yes, I wanted to say something, and that is that that Judaism is it has a structure of laws, and if those laws are broken or not adhered to, it separates whoever does that separates himself from the group. From the group of the of Jews, because if you do away with everything that is part of Judaism, you do away with the laws, and you say they don't matter to you, then they're not part of the same club.
They are, and they're still the same culture.
I would say, first of all, I agree, Tova, that there's a certain framework and boundaries that we must keep.
Right.
But what about, and I, lest it be unclear, obviously I disagree with what we're talking about with the reform or conservative and what they do, where they draw the lines. Clearly, I disagree. But first of all, they keep some boundaries, which means they keep
I'm busy.
a basic connection. Exactly the punishment in the Torah for not performing Brit Milah or Seder or Korban Pesach is
Mhm.
karet, which means being cut off. Cut off is where you cut all your connections. That's exactly what it is. You're not
Right.
connected to the basics. If people make a Seder, they don't do it halachically, but they
That's
make
okay.
a Seder.
That's
And
okay.
they perform Brit Milah and they have Yom Kippur, then they're making a statement that they're not cutting themselves off.
True.
I think they're doing something very their Judaism is within itself intrinsically it's weaker because there's so much more to Judaism that they're not including in it.
Right.
But I don't think they're leaving the club or cutting themselves off. Whereas if a person becomes anti to the people of Israel, which is the example I was giving before,
Mhm.
certainly I would draw a line over there. But what I'm saying is, if we look at a movement that's watered down, that's Judaism is weaker in my eyes, and I think it's clear why, it still has not cut itself off. And even if it doesn't believe, and even if they don't believe in Torah being God-given, but they
That's
believe
okay.
there's something godly about it, or they
Okay.
believe that there's something, some positive values that Am Yisrael brought to the world and keeps for the world. That's a connection to the Jewish people, and they're not cutting themselves off, and we should not cut them off.
But what about
Even the rabbi whose article I was describing was saying we should be totally opposed to the movement. The people, those who are Jewish, as he put it, we should keep them within.
but
They want to
that-
be part of the club. We should keep them in the club.
but that's the point. How many of them are Jews? How many are Jewish? They're married. How many
Why
are
do you
Jews?
assume that?
That's
Because
the
no,
point. for me.
I'm familiar
That's-
with. Hmm?
Obviously, that's a line that we have to keep.
Right.
Marrying Jewish, and when
Right.
they don't perform a conversion that includes keep being an active
Right.
Jew, it's just a statement, but not actively practicing Judaism, or they don't perform conversion, they just
They don't
accept
convert. They just
non-Jewish
live like that.
spouse in the community.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is a danger, and this is something I oppose, and it could become in the future. It could possibly become in the future something that, if it turns out to be that 50% of the people in Reform, I'm not saying that's the reality now. It is not the reality now. If it turns out in the future that 50% of the members in Reform communities some decades from now are not Jewish, that presents for us a question mark on their being part of the club or not part of the club. And it's up to us to try and do something about that. That returns to our discussion about conversion, having lenient Orthodox conversion. Can we or can we not? There are Orthodox rabbis who say, no, because you're watering down conversion. That's not real conversion. Real conversion is all or nothing. Either it's all or it's nothing. And the others are saying all or nothing is great, but what you're left is with nothing because all is very rare. And Orthodoxy has to address the issue and support a conversion that doesn't accept all of the mitzvot, but believes in Torah, accepts Torah as something that we are abided by, even if they don't keep it all. This is all the discussion of Shabbat afternoon. I can't get into all of that now. And that's one of the ways that I would react to it. But what I'm saying is right now, that's not the reality. The reality in Reform communities is, as a generalization, I can't say this about every community,
Right.
as a generalization that they accept non-Jewish spouse as a member in the community, even without conversion, and certainly in many places, I can't say all, certainly in many places. Certainly that's a danger. Certainly that's something to be wary of. but it is not 80% or nowhere near that. It's not 50% of those who are members of the Reform communities. Therefore, I would still look at the Reform movement as a brother, as part of being in the club.
Mhm.
Ilana.
Yeah, there are a couple of issues here. First off, for some people, the reaction to the Reform movement is a reaction to, I hate to say it, politics. That is to say, political leanings. So if you have people who are very, very liberal in their thinking, they may well be in a Reform synagogue or in a Reform community, and their politics are such that they would be more inclusive, including worrying about the poor Palestinians and so on and so forth. And I don't want to get into that, but some of the anathema with regard to the Reform movement and Reform Jews is based upon political leanings, separate from anything else. That's one thing I wanted to throw out there. Another thing is, you really need to know what the statistics are, and I don't know, with regard to the issue of accepting non-Jewish spouses as part of the community. Every synagogue, every church, whatever group, any grouping, it wants to create a community. And we do it in many different ways. What people have found over the years in I think both Reform and conservative synagogues is that when you have someone who marries out, is their partner a member of the community? I didn't say is their partner Jewish. Is their partner even considered Jewish? That's not the issue, although for some people there's this overgeneralization like that's the issue. But rather, when you send, used to be in mail, Mr. and Mrs. blah,
Right.
blah, blah, fundraising invitations to things, are they considered part of the community? Are they considered part of a member of the synagogue in a fundraising campaign? It's the same kind of
Okay.
thing. And I want to draw a distinction between that and people claiming that the non-Jewish partner is suddenly considered Jewish. That's a
Okay.
very strong and I believe mistaken statement. And there are statistics on these other things that people need to really look at, population numbers and so on. I don't have my fingers on that right now, but I want to draw that distinction.
Okay, so first of all, about the first thing you said, I agree with you. A lot of it is mixing up a lot of different things and putting them together, like anti-Israel and things like that. Doesn't always mean that it doesn't always inevitably go together. Sometimes it does, but that's a separate issue and it's not the same issue. The second point, on the one hand, I agree with you. On the other hand, I understand the fear. I understand the automatic objection. I identify with the automatic objection, but it doesn't mean that therefore the overall decision is therefore I'm opposed not only to the movement, or I don't want to support anything about that community, meaning I am very I'm not comfortable. And listen, you go to it's not, you know very well that now it's not only community members, it's also become some of the leaders who have been accepted because they became Jewish so it is an issue.
You have to distinguish between
I understand
member
I
of the
understand
community
what you're
and
saying
became
needs to
Jewish.
be distinguished, but you're playing with fire. You're creating a gray area which is problematic. Now you could say the same to me, because we had a mixed couple in Kino David many years ago. She was Jewish, he was not, meaning he came to shul He put on a kippah, stood in the back. He respected everyone. We could meet with them together and talk to them together and so on. Their son had an Aliyah Torah for her father's yahrzeit because he's her son. He's their son, but he's also her son. He's Jewish. When he got married, he had an Aliyah Torah before his wedding in Kino David.
Nice.
And we never addressed, as you say, did we ever send, I don't know if we sent fundraising to the two of them together.
You know what I'm saying?
But we respected him. We definitely respected him. By the way, when I learned about his life story and his struggle for values, for equality, for justice, the things that he's done in his life, I looked up to the man. And I even at one point tried to what's the word in English?
Broach.
Embrace.
Yeah, but to like very lightly raise a question.
Oh.
Proselytize.
What?
Broach.
Broach?
Not broach.
Broach the question of
Very
the
gentle.
possibility of him converting. And he was just a man of truth, and he said, no, it's not what I believe. I'm not going to convert. At which point I said, okay, I can't argue with that. By the way, they ended up separating. They got divorced, so that it was okay that he didn't convert. But in any case, I was trying to give a complex message. He can't have an aliyah. We won't give him any other kibud in the shul. He won't have pticha. We all remember, not all, most of us remember Shlomo Brunel. One of his non-Jewish relatives was in shul one Shabbat, and I asked if he wants to give this relative like opening the Aron, and Shlomo said to me, no. Meaning the man came with a kippah sitting next to Shlomo. I didn't know. So Shlomo said to me, no, he's a non-Jewish relative who came to shul. So we draw the distinction there. We respect the person. Just last winter, we had that sudden surprise bar mitzvah from Tuesday to Shabbat, where the family came from America and their plan to have a bar mitzvah in Tel Aviv fell through. We had the bar mitzvah like by us. The father is not Jewish, but he was there. He was respectful. He didn't get any kind of anything connected to anything halachic going on in shul, but we respected the person, and it's a message. Now, you could claim that I am creating a gray area as well. I agree, there is that danger. But it's different than becoming a member of the community, even if you're not saying that doesn't make you Jewish. You're trying to make it clear. As I said, in the long run, it's scary. I would even say there's an Orthodox rabbi. I don't know if you know. Some of you might know him. Some of you might appreciate him. That's absolutely fine. And he's saying the same thing about Orthodox communities. He's saying that Orthodoxy should accept the mixed marriages and the members, and the spouse as part of the community without conversion, not as Jewish. That's clear.
Not as Jewish.
But we're not going to be able to fight it, and it's better to keep the Jewish spouse in the community. And I think he's gone a bit too far, but I can understand his reasoning. What I'm saying, Ilana, is not that it makes them not Jewish, and I agree with you that there's also that lack of making it, the lack of distinguishing, but I agree with the this feeling that comes up so strongly that, whoa, there's an issue here. Yes, there's an issue here, but let's address it clearly. Don't make it more than it really is. Don't say, oh, 80% of them are not Jewish anyhow. No, that's not true.
And
Say
that's
there's
not
a
a
danger.
verifiable number either.
No, of course not. That's what I'm saying. That's nonsense. That's what I called before. That's just cheap propaganda. That's politics. That's saying, oh, you don't agree with one right-wing thing that I say, so you're a leftist, right? Or you don't agree with one liberal thing that I say, so you're a racist. So no, that's nonsense. That's the same nonsense as saying that 80% of the Reform people in the Reform communities are not Jewish. But to say that there isn't a danger, there is a danger. But at the same time, don't throw them out. Don't throw all the Reform movement out because they're doing something which I think is going to pose a danger in the future.
Let me show you a parallel. I mean, it's not the same thing, Rav Tzvi, but there are people who have seen or have heard that in Kinor David, we pass the Torah to the women's side on Shabbatot.
Means
Even
that maybe the women are actually considered part of the community? Oh, no.
well, see, there you go. But I don't want to go into that stream, but rather the bad mouthing that goes on with regard just to that one little custom, then oh my God, you know, and blah 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 and da, da, da. And yes, and where is the line, if there is such a thing, between fear of becoming like them versus fear of letting Christians be involved somehow in attending your synagogue because they're married to, and historically, on another note, historically, the reasons for that, for allowing non-Jewish partners to become members or not, and it's usually something, certainly in the conservative movement, that they vote on. I mean, it's a big deal. It was the fear of losing members, and as
Okay.
you know, and we've
I know.
discussed multiple times, and we're not through with the topic, I'm sure. Membership in synagogues and in churches in the US and certainly in Europe are on the decline.
Yeah.
Everywhere. It's a worldwide, I don't know what you want to call it, philosophical virus.
Okay, but I'd like to, can we,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. Yes, Eliezer.
We have Torah Emet, and for me at least, and I think for you too, Emet is a very,
Please
Emet
speak louder.
Emet is a very,
1 second, please. 1 second, I'm going to mute.
Emet
Okay, go
is a
ahead.
very important feature of the Jewish religion.
Emet is an
Emet.
important, yeah,
We end the Shema
yes,
with Emet.
yes.
And so when somebody lies and saying that former idol worshippers, that's a lie. And so, I mean, it really bothers me. And I have been in many shuls of many different varieties. I'm sure Emunah has also. And I can't remember seeing idols in any of them. No, really. I mean, you could.
There's discussion about the lions on the 2 sides of the Aron Kodesh, but that's not what you meant.
That's not what I meant. And I don't like to go to churches, but sometimes I've been forced into them. And they're full of idols. It's completely different. And the whole idea is completely different. Now, it's true that Reformed synagogues in big cities outside of Israel have had organs and have had choirs. Now, I wouldn't call that Christian, but okay, you might object to that.
It's kind of universal. And as I said, what I called it is it's kind of watering down the Jewishness of the experience.
In big cities.
Yeah, I agree. It's not not as a generalization in certain places.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of room of discussion of what the reform ideology means and whether we can accept it, whether we have to reject it. But to call it Christianity or idol worship is completely out of the realm of discussion.
And I think what you're saying is not only it's wrong and it's completely out of the realm of discussion. What you're saying is it's not only, well, I would say there are 2 levels. First of all, that's what we came to say today. People say all kinds of things, but it's way overdone and it's not accurate. The other point you're making is that it's not a Jewish way to argue. You want to argue as a Jew, so be accurate, make your claim clearly. What is wrong and how wrong is it? But don't blow it up and say things that are not true because you're afraid of some aspect of it. So let's be clear about that. I agree, and I think that's what I'm trying to do when I say about, for instance, about the issue of mixed marriages, yes, I do think it's a problem. Yes, I do think it's a danger. Yes, I do think I am wary. I'm afraid that in the future, if you don't draw clear lines in the future, I don't know what the numbers will be like, and a certain movement of part of Am Yisrael might actually disappear because they'll marry out, and that I'm worried about. But it doesn't mean that right now that's the situation. I don't want to say it's not a danger. I don't want to say that is the situation. So I'm trying to say both and keep a certain complexity between the two of them. Okay, Natael, and then Michael. Yeah,
Yeah, first of all, I don't know
and Mark.
I don't know all the figures, but I'm not sure that this kind of thinking is like a majority, like on the reform movement. I'm not sure that all the reform under the Orthodox movement, like I said, I'm not sure that there are some community like that which are at the extreme and that are, you know, they will we will lose all the Jewish community even in mixed marriage. I think the opposite. Maybe those Jews won't come to Orthodox community because of many reasons, because they are mixed marriage and all those things. But maybe for the children, it's also, and I know a lot of people, are not a lot, but at least few people that went first on this kind of community because one of the parents were non-Jewish, and especially the mother. And I have the example in France. In France, the conversion in the Orthodox movement is very complicated, very long, very difficult, and it's more difficult than in Israel. And for those Jews, and especially for the children, you know, it could take years to be converted. And I have some example of some families, some relatives that went into this reform community first, just to be accepted as a Jew because they were feeling Jews. And at home, even if one of the parents were a Jew, you know, they were everything was kosher. They were respecting the Shabbat and the Chagim and everything. But the mother was not Jew, so the children wasn't Jews as well. And when they were accepted by this reform movement in France, and they started to keep this link with Judaism, and after that they decided to go a step further and to go on Orthodox community, and then they met Halia, and now they are, you know, an Orthodox community here in Israel, and they get married to Jewish people. So I think that although for the children, you know, to be accepted on this community, and again, we don't know if in the future it will be in one sense or in the other, but it's at least a chance to keep the link with the community and to be able to have, you know, the even if it's not 100% following the halacha to do the chagim like this and like that, it keeps this link, and for the children, it's a good example, a good opportunity to stay attached to Judaism.
So I think what you're saying is very important, and again, it's let's be accurate on all sides. That's sometimes what happens. Sometimes it's the other way around. That's why I think we have to look at the reality. And sometimes, you know, as I'm saying, if what you see is that people are now in multitudes leaving the Orthodox communities and going to the Reform communities, and it's causing mixed marriages and things like that, then that's one kind of reality to react to. I don't think that's what's happening in the world that we live in, even in Chutz La'aretz where we don't live. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that these communities, maybe decades from now, will not be able to continue performing this role in Am Yisrael. But right now, for some people, they're keeping the Jewish identity. Sometimes it keeps it going for another generation. Sometimes it causes someone to come closer and to even to convert halachically properly and so on. So we can't just totally throw it out and say it's not important or we should ignore it. So these are questions that we have to, it's a complexity that can't be ignored. Thank you. Michael and then Mark.
Hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Apologize for getting here late. We had a confusion with the date and we have a sick granddaughter here and it just, but we're here.
I know a good doctor.
Yeah, okay. Chicken soup. Savta's giving her chicken soup.
That's who I meant.
Yes. It's obviously a very difficult issue. I just want to point out historically, this is not anything new. There has been assimilation taking away from Jewish numbers for 2,000 years. I mean, it's straight out of the Torah that you're going to get kicked out of the land. You'll always be a small people scattered among the nations. Why would you be a small people when everybody has such big families? Because I think because of assimilation. And if we had a way to test the population of the world and find out how many actually are halakhically Jewish, it would be fascinating. I think there's a lot, but they're not part of our
Just read
community.
about some tribe in Africa that has the same DNA as the Kohanim in Israel.
Yes. Um, so I don't think that is an issue that's going to make or break the Jewish community today. But I agree that we should be as welcoming as we can be to people that want to be part of the community. And a big part of that, I think, is the politics of today. That Israel has been isolated in the world right now. Jews throughout the world are being isolated and in some places attacked for wearing Jewish symbols. We don't need to put up barriers that will keep people away that otherwise want to be part of our community. And the question to me is, how do you do that without so diluting what we have that it becomes meaningless? And I know that's your concern, it's my concern as well. The rest of it will have to sort itself out. I mean, I know personally Reform family in Fort Worth where two of their boys took a trip to Jerusalem and wound up staying, and both are now Orthodox rabbis living in Israel. It was really a shanda to the Reform rabbi, and he tried to bring them back, and it didn't work. Who is a Jew will always be a question mark. And while there are many, many halakhic Jews that stay in the Reform community, and again, we see that here, it is more and more difficult as time goes by, and that is happening also in the conservative Jewish community. As far as the attraction of Orthodoxy, it's less of a problem to me in Israel, in the United States. Up until fairly recently, there was a great attraction to being less observant and less restrictions on behavior. But in Dallas, Texas, for an example, over the last 30 years, the number of Orthodox shuls has expanded by a factor of probably 5 or 6, maybe more than that. A group of rabbis came there, they started a kollel, they started teaching, and it is now a booming Orthodox area with 2 yeshivas, Orthodox yeshivas that kids come to from all over the country. So, politics are local, and I don't think we should worry more than we have to.
Thank you. I will try to remember what you told us about Dallas when I quote someone, but it might not be today. I'll try to remember that. Mark,
I'm really wrestling with how amongst the many responses or amongst the many stories and examples that are bubbling through my mind, I'm really wrestling about a dozen different ideas. But let me just try to choose 2. Okay, the first one is going to be quantum physics. Why quantum physics? In quantum physics, you can either be here or there. You're an atom, you're an electron in an atom, and you're either in one state or the other. And the idea of jumping from one to the other is a very complicated question in quantum physics, and nobody knows the answer. Where are you when you're in between? And there's no answer to that in quantum physics. Does that mean this all or nothing idea? It's all or nothing. You're either one place or you're other, and you're never in between. You can never be in between. Well, if you can never be in between, then you can't do conversion. But conversion by definition, you're somewhere in between. You've been brought up, or you've developed one way of thinking, and you want to develop another way of thinking, but you can't because you're all or nothing. So you can't be anywhere in between. So It's a weird statement, you're all or nothing. I think it's a really weird statement. Judaism is not quantum physics. There's a spectrum. And no matter where you are on the spectrum, there's always somebody further to one side of the spectrum and there's somebody further to the other side of the spectrum, and you're always somewhere in between. So deciding where is the line is by definition fuzzy. So thank goodness Judaism is not quantum physics, I guarantee you. Okay, although there are still some open questions as far as I know in Judaism as well as in quantum physics. The other example I want to give, I'm wrestling with two examples. One is we had very good friends in Edmonton where we spent 10 years of our lives and all of our children were born in northern Canada. My kids will never forgive me for telling them, why are you cold here? What are you talking about? It's like, 20 degrees above zero. Why are you cold? Anyway, there was a family that we knew, a couple that we knew there. The woman of the couple was non-Jewish. The man of the couple was Jewish, halakhically certainly, brought up that way, very traditional. He was not, I would say, Orthodox, but he contributed in many, many ways to the small community in Edmonton, including Chabad and all kinds of things, member of the Chevra Kadisha and so on. And she, his wife, was, as you said, Rabbi, was she going to, she was doing everything Jewish. I mean, she kept Shabbat, she had a kosher home, everything, but did she want to convert? No. She says, I don't want to convert, I'm not Jewish. I recognize that I'm not Jewish, but she contributed enormously to the community. When she died tragically a year and a half ago, very suddenly, she would not be buried in the Jewish community. So when we talk about, who's Jewish and who's not Jewish, that's when when you die. If I can give a third.
That's more.
Yeah. Okay. So I was traveling last April, and I was traveling in a remote corner of the United States called Alaska, and it really is remote. And I was looking for a place because it was near Pesach, and I was looking for a place for Seder. And I was in Fairbanks in Central Alaska, and there's no Chabad in Fairbanks, Alaska. There is a place in America or anywhere in the world where there's not Chabad. Unbelievable. Anyway, I found a Chabad near Anchorage, Alaska, which is a bit of a drive. And so I went there and I went to a Seder, and it was an absolutely beautiful Seder. The Chabad guy, his wife had just given birth to their 5th child, and the kids are just running around like kids do at Seder. And it was a really beautiful Seder, and I was sitting at a table. Let's see, at that table, probably 10 or 15% of the people were Jewish. Some were not Jewish, but married to a Jewish spouse. Some were not Jewish because they just wanted to be there and have an idea of what a Seder was like. Judaism has an interest and a value for people who are not Jewish, even. And okay, that's cultural, you might say, and so on, but it's more than cultural. It's a way of us declaring to the world, we have something to offer. Come, you come and see what we can offer you.
I will just say, thank you, Mark. I will just say one thing as a generalization about your different examples. And that is the necessity of, like you said, it's not all or nothing. It's not all or nothing also about this. On the one hand, to keep flexibility to enable things to happen that can happen. On the other hand, to draw lines, to draw limitations and boundaries, because otherwise things happen and everything gets lost. So, and Chabad is an interesting, fascinating example because where they come from in their own Jewish lives is very specific, and their openness and their acceptance and their respect more in those far out places like Anchorage, Alaska, than in Jerusalem or Ra'anana is fascinating. And that's one way of doing it. And, we're playing with another way of doing it. And possibly reform movements and reform leaders who care about Judaism and Am Yisrael are doing it in a different way, where there are things that I absolutely disagree with, but yet I can't say that they're, I'm not going to say about that also, that it's all or nothing. It's not. There are places where I will say, yes, this woman, why did I speak to this man who in Ra'anana was married to a Jewish woman? Because I wanted, when he would die, for them to be buried together. That's what I cared about, because I didn't think he was going to become a very active, performing mitzvot. But if he would become, a traditional Jew or something like that, and they could be buried together, the son would have the graves of his parents together. But he wasn't interested in that. And yes, that is a place where at least we in Orthodoxy draw a line, the same for that woman you're describing. And there's you gain things and you lose things on all sides, but we have to draw lines, and we have to be flexible, and we're always looking for balance between them. And like in quantum physics, which I don't know anything about, but I learned from you.
Give your eye, I guarantee.
And maybe we need some different forms of variations so that different people find a place, rather than either you want my complexity or nothing. That's another kind of all or nothing. Which means there can be people right from me or left from me who have a different complexity, and that's okay also. So we have to accept that as well. Yes, Michael.
I have a question. There's a famous line from the musical Fiddler on the Roof, where Tevye,
There is no other side.
if I bend that far, I will break. Is
We have a
there
saying in our family, we are very open-minded, but if you're too open-minded, your brain falls out.
100%? So is there a legitimate fear in our Orthodox community that if we bend too far, we'll break?
I absolutely think there's a legitimate fear. I experience fear. Do I think it's legitimate? I think it's legitimate. But speak about it with accuracy. Don't present people in a way which is not true about them, because you're very afraid of something they're doing. Explain exactly what they truly are and why you're afraid of that. Don't make them look a lot worse because you're afraid of them. And you know what? It's even detrimental, because you say this about reform. 80%, they say, I heard that 80% of them aren't Jewish. And then one day someone's going to find out that the statistics are wrong. And he's going to say, okay, so you were trying to brainwash me, and I'm not listening to you anymore, because what you were saying wasn't accurate, wasn't trying to be accurate. So there's also that danger. It's also part of the equation. So I just want to say one more thing for tonight, and beginning for next time. One more thing that was said, that is said about reformers, that they're anti-Zionist or not connected to Zionism, which holds a little bit of truth to it if you're in the 19th century. But since at least World War II and the Shoah and the establishment of Medinat Israel, that has turned around quite a bit. I don't know, maybe like Ilana was saying before, maybe you can find some places where it connects, but certainly not everyone, and not overall. So it's just not relevant. It's a realm of the past. It's something that maybe was true, or it was true. It was true to a certain extent in the past. It's certainly not true as a generalization today, and we can just ignore that aspect. But again, don't say things that are not true, or don't attack a certain movement because of something that was true about them 150 years ago or 100 years ago, which is not true about them today, or make a generalization which maybe was more true in the past, but it's certainly not true today. And what I'd like to do next, which is not today, is for next time, is we're going to take a look at some of a leading rabbi in the United States, Rav Moshe Feinstein, who passed away, I believe, in 82 or 83, is buried in Jerusalem, was a leading posek in America, and led a very harsh, a very rigid halachic, or created red lines which are very rigid and very negative towards non-Orthodox communities and people. And we're going to take a look at a series of things that he said, and then we're going to ask ourselves, or present a possible, not my own, this person whose book I helped finalize, but it's really his booklet, which we have in Hebrew, we don't have in English. And I'm going to present how he presents a different possible approach, and claim why maybe there was more place for Rav Moshe Feinstein's approach 50 years ago, and maybe today we should be doing something different than what he did then. So this is our plan for the next 1 or 2 sessions. Thank you, everyone. And Besarot Tovot.
Yasher
Tov.
Koach.
Laila
Yasher Koach.
Tov.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Michael, tell Etta I said hello.
Well, I will. Again, thanks for reminding us.
You're